The New York Islanders don't get a lot of shots, but they still have a shot at the Stanley Cup. And the Dallas Stars would probably be quite happy to see the Lightning and Islanders go 7. It's Thursday afternoon, and this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, powered by SportsBettingDime.com. Welcome, I'm Bob Duff, as always joined by Hall of Fame writer Kevin Allen and our regular Thursday panelist, Sascha Paruk, the lead odds maker at SportsBettingDime.com. And as always, the HockeyDebates.com podcast is brought to you by SportsBettingDime.com, your leading source for odds, sports news, and game prediction. If you're looking to see who's the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, the Conn Smythe Trophy, or who's going to win a specific series, you'll want to check out all the info at SportsBettingDime.com. We'll be talking about some of their Stanley Cup odds today, and at the end of the show, we'll also leave you a link in the description so you can check them out for yourselves. So, gentlemen, we are still waiting to see who's going to be the Eastern Conference representative. Kevin, are you worried at all about the Lightning?
A little bit I am. This Islanders team has showed itself that they're capable of persevering, and, they play the style that can win any game. And I'll tell you what, if they win this game, Game 6, I'm ready to canonize Barry Trotz, because if you look at his history, when he was with the expansion Nashville Predators for all those years, everybody always said his teams overachieved. He never really had the talent level necessary to win. When he was with Washington, no one was able to get the best out of Ovechkin, but he did. And as soon as he left, they really haven't been the same team. Now, obviously, they've had to make adjustments to the roster, so it's not the same team. But, look at the impact he's had on the Islanders. And, it's just the mentality that he's brought to that team. There's no quit in it. There's lots of fire, lots of passion. They play that defensive style that he's been playing for years, and it's very effective. You just compare the talent level of those two teams, and they really don't measure up. They, being the Islanders, don't measure up to the talent of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Lightning should win this series. But, he's got them there, and, I think we all give them a chance to win tonight. I expect Tampa Bay to win, but, with the Trotz factor, and with the sort of style that he's, forced his team to play, you can't count him out.
I even go back to the Nashville playoff series with the Red Wings. Basically had an expansion roster with no names. And the Wings fit. Wouldn't beat them. In the long run, they'd lose the series, but they'd usually take the Wings at least 6 games to get rid of each other. That's fun. So, you look at this series, I know, Sascha, I look at the numbers from last night. 92 minutes of hockey. 24 shots on goal. 32 minutes of overtime. 8 shots on goal. It seems like, looking at it from a theory of probability, you can't keep playing hockey that way.
Sorry, Bob, your mic is cutting out. I heard basically none of that question. I don't know if Kevin did. Kevin,
I didn't either. It was fading out for me too. It's Bob, I think so.
Sorry, Bob. I don't think your audio problems are resolved yet.
We've lost you.
No, we got nothing. It was coming. It was coming in and out. There was some static, and I could hear you for some brief seconds, but just a word here and there. So I have no idea what we're talking about.
All right. So anybody now? Anybody hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now.
I can hear you perfectly now. Whatever you just did.
I closed the window on my browser. Maybe that was the problem. Anyway, as I was saying, Sascha, you're kind of our analytics expert. We count on you for all those number crunching duties that Kevin and I are too old school. And both of us, neither of us were math majors, so we couldn't play with numbers to start with. But anyway, what I was saying was, I look at the numbers from that Game 5, and I see the Islanders in 92 minutes of hockey, including the overtime, getting 24 shots on goal. And in 32 minutes of overtime hockey, they had 8 shots on goal. Now, I would think from a simple theory of probability, to keep playing hockey that way and winning in the long run just doesn't add up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There were some sort of funny stats about Vegas in the playoffs where they didn't win a game where they had more than 40 shots, which happened sort of like 5 or 6 times. But with Vegas, it was the case of they were chasing the game. They got behind early, and the other team, usually Dallas, sometimes Vancouver, was playing a much more defensively oriented style. And so Vegas was, like the Corsi and their Fenwick were off the charts, and they were generating far more chances because that sort of was the game script. That's not what you're seeing here with the Islanders. These are tight games. It's not a case of the Islanders being able to sit back and trying to protect leads. It's a case of, as Kevin was saying, there being a pretty big talent disparity between the two rosters. So I would be very worried if I was an Islander bettor at this point in time, and I had them winning the Stanley Cup. I'm not going to count them out. I agree with Kevin wholeheartedly that Barry Trotz can work miracles. I think everyone forgets that basically 2 goalies got run out of town the year before he got there. That's how porous their defense was. But winning 2 straight games against this Lightning team and then having to win 4 more against Dallas, which looks like a team of destiny, it's a very big hill to climb.
Many years ago, and Bob, you may remember even who wrote it, there was a book called Tell Your Statistics to Shut Up. And I'm a believer in analytics, particularly, throughout the season. But I think when you get down to individual games, or particularly playoff games, you really do. Statistics don't matter as much as, the intangibles start to become a much bigger deal over the course of a season or even a playoff series. Like certainly analytics sort of tell the story. And we've learned, by following them that you can really learn a lot from them. But for an individual game, you can't measure things like team's ability to find a way and or just a team that just feels good about itself and the momentum. The Dallas Stars are what I call a momentum team. Every year we have these teams that sort of just rise up. And I think back to the Nashville team that got to the finals against Pittsburgh. I think back to the New Jersey Devil team that got and played the LA Kings in the Stanley Cup final in 2012. And I think Dallas is a similar, type team where, there's really no explanation for why all of a sudden they started to score or why Khudobin was as good as he was, even though there were hints of it in the regular season when his numbers were actually better than Bishop's numbers. But there's, factors that really can't be explained in sort of the short run of the postseason. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Islanders. I think we know they're not as good as some of these teams, but they find a way and they sort of understand what they need to do. And my wife was a high school coach, and she always says that survival skills are an athletic talent. The ability to hang in there until you can find a way to be successful, even if you're being overmatched. And I think some of these teams that we've talked about, the Dallas Stars, particularly the Islanders, they have terrific survival skills where even when they're being outplayed and all the statistics say, they should lose that game, they just sort of hang on and figure out a way until they can figure out some way just to win the game.
Yeah. What you're sort of touching on, what the sort of mathematicians would be talking about is there being increased variability in small sample sizes. And so when the sample size is one game, in particular one game where you're playing the Islanders style of play, the variability there is going to be massive, even though there is a giant talent gap between the two rosters. And the fewer shots there are in a game, the more variation there's going to be. It's something that people who bet on football know about. The fewer possessions there are, the better chance the underdog has, because the more times the better team has the ball, the more times they have to show how much better they are. If there was a one drive football game, the odds for that game, even if it was between the best team in the league and the worst team in the league, wouldn't be that far apart because anything can happen.
I wonder what the longest possession ever for a team on one drive is. That would be an interesting record to know.
I'm sure it's held by Army.
I would agree with that.
The longtime Major League Baseball manager Jim Leland used to always say, momentum's only as good as your next day's starting pitcher. Now, the hockey version of that I've always thought to be momentum's only as good as your starting goalie. Now, the Lightning spent a first-round pick to get Vasilevsky. He's considered one of the elite goalies in the league. He's won the Vezina. Is tonight the night where a guy of that caliber, his job is just to go in there, Kevin, and shut that door until his team gets some goals?
Well, for sure. And I also, I know we were going to talk about the Conn Smythe, but I think that Vasilevsky has been so solid and dependable. And, we don't ever wonder who's playing goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's no going into this game, is he going to make a goalie switch, even though that's sort of been a trend during this postseason. We know who their goalie is, and he's been terrific. And, we talked about Braden Point and Kucherov and winning, the Conn Smythe. But, Vasilevsky has got a goals against average below 2, and the save percentage is up there, and he's made big saves when they've needed him. He's just done what he's supposed to do. And we're probably not giving him enough credit for, how solid and dependable and important he has been to this team. And I'm sure he will be in this Game 6 as well. Maybe this is the night he gets a shutout, and we'll sort of all notice how good he's been. He should be right there in the mention of the Conn Smythe.
Well, you look at this game tonight. Tampa Bay is the minus 155 favorite. You'll get plus 132 if you bet the Islanders. Now, we've had a couple of these 3-1 scenarios where the other team came back and forced Game 7, Vancouver against Vegas and Colorado against Dallas. Now, the team that was up 3-1 eventually recovered and won Game 7. I mean, it's just such a huge mountain to climb. Coming back from 3-0, we always talk about how impossible that is. But to me, 3-1, although it's been done more often, it's still, Sasha, the mathematics on that, when you've got to win 3 games in a row, especially at this stage where there's not a lot of discrepancy in terms of the ability of the two teams. I would think the odds of winning 3 games in a row against a team in that scenario would be pretty remote.
Yeah, even if every game is a 50-50 proposition, you're looking at a 12.5% chance, and I don't think that these games are 50-50 propositions. Now, that said, I'm not eager to lay minus 155 on Tampa Bay, in particular with Braden Point being a game-time decision. I've said this so many times, but the style of play that Barry Trotz implements is just so prone to creating, to go back to the football analogy, a game with fewer possessions. And as you've seen time and time again with the Islanders team that really doesn't have the talent level that should be able to compete with a team like Tampa Bay, they're there and they're doing it because of the style that they play.
One of the things that's been talked about a lot with the Islanders this season, Kevin, is that you look at their Corsi numbers and that, and it's not great. But the thing is, the Islanders let you have the puck, but they don't let you get the puck where you need to get it to score a goal. And that's kind of been the way. It's almost like Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope. We'll let you get close, but you're not getting the money shot in.
Yeah, they almost fool you a little bit. They make you think you're doing fine and getting the puck. It's not so much. They just they don't let you get it where you want it. And that I think that's been the key for them. They also haven't needed a lot of shots to get the job done as well. I mean, it's just really been a sort of a fascinating run. And the other thing that I find interesting is they were a better team in my mind when they were the number 1 defensive team. This year, I think they were 9th or something. I mean, they're a good defensive team. They've been better in the postseason than they were in the regular season, to be honest. But, they've been better in the past. But this team, as I mentioned before, I think there's a confidence level here that may be greater than what they had with that team that was the number 1 defensive team. And, I think this team sort of, just has the right camaraderie, the right chemistry, and as I mentioned, their confidence. I don't think has waned a bit. Even when they fell behind, 3-1 in this series. I think they knew the hole they had dug, but I don't think they were completely thinking, okay, well now's the time, we're done. That's not the way they've played, at least. And the other element to this game is then Sascha alluded to it, is Braden Point's value becomes even more visible when he's not there. When Steven Stamkos out, we've talked about it all the time, but he's just so important to this offense, and that's going to be a determining factor, whether he can play or not.
Yeah. They won the 3 games that he played in and lost the 2 that he didn't, right?
Yeah. The thing that you really notice the last 2 games is that Kucherov just kind of looks lost. He just doesn't seem to have that kind of chemistry with anybody else on the team that he has with Point. They just seem to mesh together so well. They kind of read off each other and they make things happen. And it seems like without Point, Kucherov's a lot less of a dangerous player as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be taken into account when they vote, presuming, and this is a big presumption, presuming they win this series and then win the Stanley Cup, and you're voting on Conn Smythe. I think the voting panel, which is a lot smaller than we see for the awards. I mean, it's down to like 15 or 18 now. It might even be 15. And so it's a small number. And they will certainly remember just what you said, that that the Kucherov, who could end up with more points than Braden Point, was not as effective when Point wasn't in the lineup.
Well, let's talk about the Conn Smythe then, since you brought it up. And if you go to sportsbettingdime.com, you can check out all the latest odds on the Conn Smythe Trophy tracker. And right now, the guy who is the favorite is Braden Point at plus 140. Now, in Point's case, Sascha, will absence make his odds grow shorter? Seeing how much value he has.
Absence has actually made his odds grow a little bit longer. The latest odds have him at plus 200, and your new Conn Smythe favorite is the Dallas Stars leading scorer, Miro Heiskanen, at plus 185. But based on what Kevin was talking about, you have to remember, if you are wagering on these things, that it's not strictly statistically based. These are things that are voted on by humans, and narratives come into play. So if there is sort of a groundswell in the media that says Braden Point is so key to this team, look at what's happening to Kucherov when he's not on the ice, that's something that human beings are going to remember when it comes time to vote. So it's absolutely something to keep in mind. Now, that being said, you can get Andrei Vasilevsky at plus 750 at this point. Braden Point, as I said, is at plus 200. Nikita Kucherov is at plus 240. If you are sort of attenuating Kucherov's chances because he looks worse without Point, I think you also have to attenuate Point's chances because he's missing games, and there's a pretty good chance he's going to miss more. He might miss some in the finals. And if those two are sort of not shoo-ins, if we're leaving quite a bit of door open for someone else to slide in there, Andrei Vasilevsky is the sort of logical choice at that point in time. And so I think, as Kevin didn't quite say but was hinting at, Andrei Vasilevsky for the Conn Smythe at this point in time might be a worthwhile investment.
Another factor is that this is pandemic hockey as well, and as Sascha pointed out, the human element and the narrative is important, especially with a small panel like you have for Conn Smythe. But the reporters that are covering this playoff, are not together necessarily. A lot of people are doing this from their couch now because of the pandemic, and those who are actually there, they're not all together in a press box scenario. They're scattered around the stands. You can watch it from wherever you can find a perch. So, there's probably going to be less discussion of it than we normally would see when the whole group is sort of gathered. So it'll be left to everybody's. There will be no, group mentality to this. So it's going to be interesting to see, what role that will play in determination. And the other thing I would like to bring up with the Conn Smythe is, let's just say for the sake of fun, and that's all that it would be, is that the Islanders win this and series against Tampa Bay and then go and take down Dallas. Who the heck is their Conn Smythe winner? I look at that mess and, I go, well, it's really been a team effort. Maybe it's Barry Trotz. I don't know who their top player is. Like we know Heiskanen's been their best player, and we got 2 or 3 or 4 candidates. We haven't even brought up Edmund. They've got some candidates for Tam. I don't know who the New York Islanders' best player has been. I really don't.
Well, the odds makers will say that it's Matthew Barzal.
Yeah, no, I know.
The shortest odds at plus 1,500 of any Islander. But I think that is just a ludicrous price. Plus 1,500, you're looking at a 6.3% implied probability, whereas odds makers are giving the Islanders themselves basically a 9% chance. And so you're saying that if the Islanders win the Cup, there's a 66% chance that Matthew Barzal wins the Conn Smythe Trophy? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, scoring.
It will come down to who plays the best in the final if that scenario happens. There's no doubt about it.
Well, another guy that we haven't touched on, and we're talking about narratives, and you've got the latest odds in front of you there, Sascha. The last I saw in Hudobin was plus 2,300. Now, you would think, you talk about a narrative. Is there a better story right now individually in the playoffs than Hudobin coming in? He's such a goofy kind of character. And he's a backup goalie. He wasn't supposed to play, and now he's got them to the final.
Yeah, his odds have gotten considerably shorter. He is now the 5th favorite on the board at plus 350. So a lot of people agree with you. There aren't a lot of better stories. And his post-game celebrations are only serving to put him sort of more front and center. But as sort of people have pointed out recently, the track record of goalies winning the Conn Smythe is not as prevalent as most people think. There are so many great stories, sort of Cam Ward in 2006, of hot goalies leading their teams to championships. But in actual fact, the sort of trend, if you're looking at it, doesn't favor goalies that strongly. So I think that's part of the reason why you still see Vasilevsky at a fairly long price. And it would be something to consider if you were looking at a Khudobin bet at plus 350.
Another thing I've noticed over the years, Kevin, and I'm sure you have as well, is you almost never see a defenseman win the Hart Trophy. I mean, even in the era of Bobby Orr, I think Chris Pronger is the only guy to win it, a defenseman to win it since Bobby Orr. And yet defensemen win a lot of Conn Smythe trophies. Now, is it as simple a fact as they have the Norris in the regular season to win, so they get overlooked for the Hart, and they don't have that in the playoffs?
Well, people say that, and I always hated that because that's just absurd. It's the Norris is not the defenseman MVP, and the Hart shouldn't be the forward MVP. But it has sort of evolved into that. And I've actually heard writers say, well, the defensemen have their own award, which is just sort of ludicrous, to be sure. So, I wish that everybody would look at it differently. I also do not like the emphasis on points that we see with the Hart. Now, obviously, it doesn't always go to the leading point getter, but I would like to see it looked upon in terms of factoring in the intangibles of leadership and importance to the team, which is sort of written into the rules. But that's kind of that nebulous most important player to his team is always difficult to find and leads itself to a wide variation of interpretation. So, some writers look at it as just the best player they saw. Some look at it as, like they wouldn't give it to a player that his team didn't make the playoffs. It's sort of all over the map on that. But, for the most part, I think the writers have, been in the ballpark in terms of they have given them, but there have been some times when I thought defensemen deserved a better shake.
Duncan Keith did with the Blackhawks. He was the last defenseman.
No, I was talking about the Hart Trophy, though, I think. Probably,
sorry.
probably the only defenseman to win the Hart, I think, since Bobby Orr.
You're right.
Yeah, but several defensemen have won. Nick Lidstrom won the Conn Smythe.
For sure he did, yeah.
Certainly, you look at the odds, and we've mentioned Hedman, we've mentioned Heiskin, and there's defensemen that have a really good shot at this. Klingberg had pretty good odds until Vegas lost out. Shea Theodore was the most likely candidate to win on their team. So it just seems to be in the playoffs, and it could be as simple as just because they, as you say, Kevin, the writers think, well, they've got their own award in the regular season, but they, in the playoffs they don't. So maybe we got to get rid of the Vezina and the Norris and just have an MVP and see if goalies and defensemen start winning it again.
Well, there's nothing worse than writers making up their own rules. That's why we have rules. I got it when I was president of the Writers Association. I got into a debate with one of our more prominent writers who believed that if two players were close in terms of rookie of the year, he always gave it to the player who was, younger player. Like he'd be more inclined to give it to a player right out of junior than a 24-year-old who had come out of college because he was younger. And I said, the rules don't state that, you should consider age as a factor. They just say a guy is eligible if he's 25 and under, and you should look at them all the same. But, he just didn't see it that way. And I said, if we don't like that, then we should change the rules to make that something that we wanted to put in there. But, it just makes it hard if everybody's going to interpret it differently. We should all kind of decide on what it should be, and I think it makes it more consistent voting.
Well, on that subject, nothing to do with the playoffs, but we talked about this the other day, Kevin, the Austin Matthews Lady Byng balloting. There was a big debate over that, whether because he had that charge against him last summer, which I can't remember now exactly what the wording was on the charge, so I don't want to try to guess at it, but I know it was a bad character situation where he'd done some things that, didn't shine a very good light upon him. And a lot of writers decided that they couldn't vote for him for the Lady Byng because of that. And where do you fall in that argument?
Well, I actually voted for him, not first, but I did vote for him. And the way I viewed it, because I did think about that, is that, the Lady Byng, this is not a character award. To me, it was performance on the ice. The person who's the most gentlemanly when you play, that with the emphasis on play when you're playing. It doesn't say, who's a good guy in the dressing room or who does a lot of community service. None of that is written in the rules. It's just when you're on the ice, who's the guy that's the most gentlemanly. And the way I viewed it, for him to be always in the high traffic areas needed to be a goal scorer, and if he had only 4 penalty minutes, he must be playing a reasonably polite game, and certainly, going out of his way to stay within the rules. So, I did have him on my ballot. I didn't have him first, but saying all that, since it's been raised, I've second guessed that a little bit and wondered whether or not that should have been a factor. Was I just missing the boat on that? And I truly don't have an answer for that. And I know some of my colleagues have said that they, now that they've given it some thought and, some good hockey knowledgeable folks have written sort of about it and made a case for why we should have included. And I think a lot of us have looked at that and wondered if we should have taken that into account.
You're basically describing the bane of my existence when it comes to handicapping NHL awards.
Yeah.
I am so much happier and so much better at handicapping like the Art Ross than the Lady Byng or the Masterson.
Sasha, you've actually been able to articulate that better than I've ever heard anyone do it. And it's so right. I mean, it's the right word that you use, the narrative. That's what happens with so many of these awards is the narrative becomes important. And not to make this into a political thing, but I'm going to use some phrasing that the President Trump used by mistake, but is the right here, and that is herd mentality. there is sort of a herd mentality in the voting process, as we all tend to read each other. And although we no longer will publish our votes beforehand, because the league has asked us not to do that, because too many people like yourself with great math capabilities can figure out the probability of who won based if you get enough votes in. But we do sort of read how people are thinking and talking. And then all of a sudden there is a herd mentality that sort of takes over, and then there's a narrative, and then the question becomes, are you believing in that narrative, or are you going to be independent and do your own thing? And that's why I said that the more consistent you can, or the more precise you can be in your wording of the rules, I think we'd all be better off if we actually rewrote the rules and made it clear what we're trying to accomplish.
So on that note, going back to football for a second, one of the analysts who used to work here did some research and found that there was a very, very strong correlation between basically search traffic and winning the Heisman Trophy. So the person who ended up winning the Heisman Trophy over the course of the year was sort of trending higher and higher and higher in Google searches. And generally the person who was in the running and had the most Google searches was the person who ended up winning Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, it's you can always be better. Although I will stand by our record. We have not. If you look at it, I've had to defend the writers' voting many times, often with an irate general manager whose player didn't win an award. And, I had been doing it for so long that I had it down chapter and verse, and I had statistics on, geography does not play a role in it. We've proven that over and over. Like, there is no East Coast bias. Certainly players from the West have won major awards. And really the one East Coast bias we did find was in the voting for the Vezina, which is conducted by general managers. If you look at the number of goalies that have won in the East versus the number that won from the West, it's not hard to suggest that they tend to favor East Coast goalies. So, but I think for the most part, we've gotten it right. And if people thought we didn't get it right, it was one of those close decisions that could have gone either way.
Well, there's one thing we've got that we know is right now, and that's we're out of time yet again. We've burned through our half an hour in no time at all. It never seems like it's 30 minutes. And he's Kevin, I'm Bob, and that's Sascha, and we'll all be back with you on Thursday. And on Tuesday, Kevin and I will be back with a special guest to talk some hockey, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, guys.